Hello and welcome to Punctual Politics. I'm your host, Dawson Iasillo, and I'm so excited to be kicking things off with you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we have a packed agenda, a wave of controversial moves from the White House, a tragic shooting in Michigan, big shifts in local politics, and looming threats to how our government operates. Let's dig in. Let's start with the most dramatic development. President Trump has ordered troop deployments to Memphis, Tennessee, and Portland, Oregon. In Memphis, he's sending the National Guard, citing concerns about crime in what he calls a deeply troubled city. In Portland, Trump has authorized full force if necessary to protect immigration and federal enforcement facilities, citing threats from what he labels as domestic terrorists. The Department of Defense has federalized 200 Oregon National Guard troops for 60 days to protect ICE and other federal personnel. Local officials and state leaders have pushed back hard. Oregon has sued to block the deployment, calling it unconstitutional and a violation of state sovereignty. The governor and attorney general say there's no credible threat justifying military intervention. So what's going on here? On one hand, the administration is framing this as a law and order push, claiming local governments are either unable or unwilling to act. On the other hand, critics see this as a politically moved escalation designed to stoke fear, override local control, and centralize power in the executive branch. For Punctual Politics listeners, keep an eye on the courts. If Oregon's challenge succeeds, it could put limits on how far a president can go with domestic military deployments in the future. Next up, a statement from Trump that's already drawing fierce criticism from scientists, medical professionals, and advocacy groups. He asserts that Tylenol causes autism, but did so without supporting any scientific evidence. This is not a new debate. The link between vaccines, medications, and autism has been thoroughly investigated by scientists, and no credible evidence supports the claim that Tylenol or acetaminophen causes autism. What's new is this presidential platform amplifying misinformation. So why does this matter? When a public figure, especially a president, makes medical claims without evidence, it can cause confusion, fear, distrust in public health. We'll likely see pushback from medical associations, autism advocacy groups, and fact-checkers over the days to come. Shifting gears to Michigan, where a gunman attacked a church, killing at least 4 people and injuring several others, then setting the building on fire. Reports indicate the assailant opened fire inside the sanctuary before the blaze erupted. This event is a painful reminder that gun violence continues to ravage communities and places of worship, spaces where people go seeking comfort and safety. In the coming days, expect calls for renewed debate over gun reform, security at religious institutions, and mental health interventions. For many, the tragedy underscores how politics and public policy directly intersect human lives. On the foreign policy front, President Trump has floated a new proposal aimed at ending the war in Gaza. While details remain thin, sources suggest it may involve ceasing support to some parties, restructuring aid delivery, and possibly using diplomatic pressure to broker a ceasefire. The timing is noteworthy. The conflict has drawn intense international scrutiny, and any U.S. pivot or role in mediation could redefine America's influence in the region. But as always, the devil is in the details. How terms are negotiated, how partners respond, and whether the proposal is viable on the ground will all determine its success or failure. Now back home, Congress and the White House are careening towards another government shutdown. With deadlines approaching and little agreement in sight, the possibility looms that when you hear this podcast, parts of the federal government may already be shuttered. In practical terms, a shutdown means furloughed federal workers, paused services, suspended programs, and economic ripple effects across sectors. Politically, shutdowns have been a long pressure tactic, but they inflict real costs on ordinary citizens and expose the dysfunction of our budget process. If this podcast is airing after a shutdown begins, we'll talk in our next episode about which agencies were affected, how long the shutdown lasted, and who bore the brunt. In what many observers call a bold and controversial move, Trump has announced a plan to impose a 100% tariff on foreign-made movies imported into the U.S. This raises a host of legal, economic, cultural, and diplomatic questions. How would this interact with international trade agreements and WTO rules? Could it spark retaliation on U.S. exports of films or cultural goods? What effect would it have on film distribution, streaming services, or foreign film festivals? It's a striking example of how culture and soft power are now entangled with trade policy and geopolitical signaling. In North Carolina, police have arrested a Marine veteran after a shooting outside a bar in Fayetteville Saturday night. One man was killed and 2 others were hurt. The suspect turned himself in peacefully and is now facing several charges, including second-degree murder, and investigators are still trying to figure out what led to the shooting. On a different note, Vice President Kamala Harris just dropped a new book called 107 Days. It's basically her inside story about the last stretch of the 2024 campaign trail. The highs, the lows, and some behind the scenes in the drama. It's already stirring up chatter online with supporters saying it's inspiring, and critics, well, being critics. In Missouri, Governor Mike Parson signed off on a Trump-backed redistricting plan. The new map could give Republicans an edge in picking up another U.S. House seat next election. Backers say it's just fixing population shifts, but opponents are calling it straight-up gerrymandering that sidelines voters in urban areas. So you can expect some more debate over that one. We'll head over to Mississippi, where the community is grieving after 23-year-old Trayvon Reed was found dead hanging from a tree near his home. Police say the investigation is still open. They haven't said yet if they believe it was suicide or foul play, and that uncertainty is fueling a lot of concern and anger locally. Friends and family describe Reed as kind, funny, and deeply loved. His death has already sparked vigils and protests, with neighbors demanding transparency in the investigation. A lot of people in the area feel like tragedies like this don't always get the attention they deserve, and that's part of why emotions are running so high right now. This is one of those stories where it's important to slow down and remember there's a grieving family at the center of it. While we wait for more details from investigators, the community is focused on honoring Trayvon's life and calling for answers. Turning to U.S. institutions, former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted by the Department of Justice on charges of false statements and obstruction. Trump has cast the move as holding Comey accountable for betraying Trump's beliefs of his version of justice. Comey insists he is innocent and called for a fair trial. Critics accuse the Trump administration of weaponizing the justice system to go after political foes, but the White House frames it as restoring accountability. Regardless of one's view on Comey, this marks a deep escalation in how the Executive and Justice Department interact with entrenched institutions of overview and law enforcement. Finally, in a significant local political shift, New York City Mayor Eric Adams was announced that he is ending his campaign for re-election. This moves open up the races in one of America's most influential cities. It raises question, who steps into the void, and what are the political pressures of Adams' decision to leave? For listeners following national trends, New York City is often a bellwether, so this could ripple beyond the city's borders. With Adams leaving the race, it leaves the seat up for grabs for Zohran Mamdani, Curtis Sliwa, and Andrew Cuomo. We've covered a lot today. Troop deployments, a tragic shooting, political indictments, trade proposals, a looming shutdown, and shifting local leadership. Thank you so much for listening to Punctual Politics. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to the Daily Nebraskan YouTube. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and I'll see you back here next week.